Hi, everybody. My name is Cassandra Ben Sahi. Thank you for joining us. I'm the coordinator for Massachusetts Against Solitary Confinement. We are here with some solitary survivors, advocates, warriors, and fighters for criminal justice reform. We have with us right now, warriors and Leslie Credle, criminal Jarrell Laurinell, and Laura Wagner is a co-host. Michael Cox is with us. Jesse White from Prison Legal Services is also with us. We're going to have a conversation today. This conversation is framed because we're in solidarity today with our people inside the prisons and jails who are being locked down for 23 hours a day. So it's the 23rd of the month. We're taking action. We're taking action because of the use of solitary confinement. It's a form of torture. Solitary is a public health emergency. Solitary confinement is not social distancing. We look at solitary confinement as a form of torture, and it's being escalated by the careless public officials that are less interested in stopping the spread of COVID-19 through proven approaches like decarceration than they are in enabling the arbitrary use of cruel and inhumane treatment on incarcerated people. So with that, as an introduction, I'm going to call on my first two comrades, friends, and guests. This question is for Leslie and Jarrell. And Leslie, you can start first. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with solitary confinement? What was it like if you didn't feel good? How was the DOC's response to that?
Okay. With my experience, I spent 10 months in solitary confinement, and the women, when we go to prison, we kind of like detox from our trauma, because we're faced to face, everything that's happened that brought us to prison. Also, we are mothers. So what happens are women get more emotional. We're separated from our children. And most of us are the primary caretaker of our children. So when we go to prison, our families fall apart because we are the backbone. We hold the family together. We don't get the support that the brothers get. Their wives hold them down, or, their mothers hold them down. Women usually are left to fend for themselves. So their children sometimes are taken away, or they're left with family members who aren't going to give them that kind of love that we give them. Some of our children get abused. Some of our children get lost in the streets. Myself, my daughter was murdered while I was in prison. So we are dealing with all that trauma and then guilt on top of it, because we feel like we let our kids down. So when you put someone in a cell for 23 hours a day and they have to think about all of that, that's enough to drive you crazy, right? So when we reach out to the psych or the nurses or the officers, they always have a punitive approach. So they never take us serious. They always make comments like, "Oh, you're a criminal. Why should I believe you? You're just trying to get attention." Or the nurses will be like, "Well, if you don't like the treatment that you're getting, don't come to prison. It's your fault you're here." So women are seeking some kind of help mentally, and they're laughed at. So what ends up happening is to get help, they have to do drastic things. So they have to be pushed to a limit where they're trying to hurt themselves, or they lash out at the people who are causing them more trauma, which are the administration, the system, the officers, and sometimes they'll do things that we know the system, so we'll know something that's going to mess up the whole system, like not giving back a fork. Forks, I don't know if anybody knows who's watching, but forks are counted in prison, and if all the forks aren't accounted for, nobody moves. Okay, the whole prison shuts down until they find that fork. So, you know, a woman would be in solitary confinement and refuse to give back a fork. You know, something small like that. And they'll call the SWAT team. And they'll come in that cell with like 6 big guards, men guards, and they'll beat the shit out of you. You know, they'll twist your arms till it's broken. I've seen them carry women out like she's a casket, all 6 of them holding her in the air, twisting her arms, and she's screaming, "You're breaking my arm, you're breaking my arm." So solitary confinement is hard to do for a strong person, you know. So there are women in prison that do nothing wrong because they know they can't handle a lock, right?
Yes.
So as soon as they say you're going to the SHU, they don't even make it to the SHU. They'll go right on suicide watch from the jump, you know, because they know they can't deal with it. So when you lock a whole prison down, everybody, you get all of those weak women, you know, locked in a cell for months now, you know.
Yes.
And so everything that they are dealing with, they're sitting still.
Yes.
And they're dealing with that mentally.
Thank you so
much. On top
much.
of COVID, and afraid for your life, like you're gonna die if you catch this virus. Like, whew, I can't imagine the mental strain that puts on a person, and doubly on a person who's already in a bad situation.
Yes.
So it's like kicking somebody when they're already beat up, you know. That's the only way I can explain it. And traumatizing them to a point where some of them might not make it back. And I can tell you that right now. Some women are not going to make it back from this. So I don't want to hold up the time. You know, I know you have more questions.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And we're so sorry for your loss. Thank you for sharing from your heart. Deeply appreciated. Mm-hmm. I see that our brother Keon has joined us. Keon, much love. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have you for a minute. We were going to ask Jarrell to elaborate on the question about solitary and how it cannot be the response to COVID from experience. And then we'll call on you.
Yeah, he definitely knows.
Yeah, how's everybody doing? I want to say what's up to everybody on the panel, on this call, everybody who's watching. And, you know, Leslie, my heart goes out to you. You know, every time, you know, I know it's tough, you know, hard, man, you know, speaking that trauma, you know what I'm saying, to people. So it's like, I just want to send my heart to you. And then for me, you know, if people don't know, obviously, I mean, I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm a prison abolitionist right now, organizing under Families for Justice is Healing. And you know, I have a lot of experience in solitary confinement. So I've been in AdSeg, administrator to the whole. I've never been to DDU. Shout out to all my, you know, my brothers in DDU. I've never been to DDU. I got a little brother and a couple of my comrades in DDU right now. So I kind of like, you know, have an idea of what they're going through. But for me, I've been in solitary confinement during like, what was that? H1N1, right? Not as bad, right? As say it was going on now, but it was definitely, you know, something that's, you know, have put fear in our hearts, right? We don't know what's going on. And when you're in solitary confinement, you know, you don't get no information about what's going on in the world. So it's like, you know, that anxiety, first you got to deal with the anxiety of being in the hole, but then you got to deal with the anxiety of what might happen to you because, you know, they don't have nothing in place, you know, to take care of you while you're in there, right? And speaking of COVID, not even speaking about COVID, I've been to the hole over the littlest things, right? You know, infections, right, that go untreated, you know, injuries that go untreated, and, you know, you're already being sent to the hole for a long period of time, you know, over the smallest things. So people that speak to me while they was in the hole right now during this COVID, they're saying that nothing is happening, no information is being told to them, right? So it's just like the answer for them is always solitary confinement, right? They're just using solitary confinement as a mechanism of control and just to get rid of something, right? So like they put you in a hole. So you, like Leslie was saying, you got to deal with that anxiety, you know, for now more than 23 hours a day, because a lot of people, men and women, aren't even coming out for their hour of rec, you know, in Massachusetts right now.
Jarrell, can I ask you, has anyone told you that has been put in the hole for COVID positive? Have they talked about the treatment that they've received? Have they seen medical people? Have they received any kind of medical care while they're quarantined, so-called, in medical isolation and solitary confinement?
To my knowledge, no. What's going on now is even people who are not so-called have the symptoms are being placed in environments with people who have the symptoms, right? And a lot of places in Massachusetts aren't even testing, right? Susan Baranowski, they're not testing in Susan Baranowski. So men in Susan Baranowski are having to live, you know, through these supermax solitary confinement conditions that they're calling general population right now, right? Forcing them to double bunk, right? You know, they got all the singles upstairs open, right? They can easily put people in the single cells, but they're like Leslie was saying, they're forcing people to move or be together in these double bunk conditions with people with symptoms, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a nightmare right now.
Yes, yes, it is. Thank you so much, brother. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Keon, how are you?
I'm all right. How you doing? How are y'all doing?
We are good. We are blessed to be here and be in service, you know. Keon, thank you for joining us. Can you talk a little bit about, you have so much experience, brother, unjust experience. We're talking about solitary confinement being the response to this epidemic, this pandemic. You have a lot of time experience. What are your thoughts around this? Solutions, thoughts?
Well, I mean, I feel like Rel hit it on the head with most of the stuff he was saying. You know, I did 20 years, so during that time I have been incarcerated, like put inside solitary. You know, I didn't have to actually go to DDU, but I've been on a 10-block tiers waiting to go. You know, I don't feel like, I've been speaking to different guys from Concord and Norfolk, and from what I'm hearing, they're letting them out. Now they just kind of loosened the rec a little bit in Concord, where they're kind of letting them out maybe like an hour or whatever. I don't know, I'm waiting for my brother to call me back. But prior to that, they was just locked in. At one point, they didn't have no masks. Now they have masks, right? if a person is coughing or he's going through a certain situation, they have a place that they're gonna put you, which is the hole anyway, but they're already in hole-like conditions. So I've seen people go to solitary confinement and come back not being the same person they was when we grew up. So this is no different, right? If you got everybody locked in for 23 hours, or sometimes it's 23 hours and a half, you know, some guys ain't making it out depending on what happens, if there's some type of emergency freeze up or whatever the police are doing, right? Then what is that doing mentally to a person? Then even if a person's sick, let's say they are actually sick and you do want to keep them separate from someone else, so you put them into the hole. The hole has electricity and everything else. Bring that person their canteen, bring them their TV, bring them their radio, things so that they can go through that 14 days, you know, humanely. Why are you separating a person and putting them in the hole and thinking that that's the solution? Like Rel said, that there's no way to contact and be like, well, what's going on in general population? What's going on in the world? You don't know that, right? What I've been hearing from different people is that you have guards that come in on the morning shift wearing masks and quote unquote taking precautions, and then guards that come on the night shift not wearing any mask or anything, because there's no longer superintendents or higher administrative people to hold them accountable, right? So what you're doing is possibly bringing something in that may kill massive amount of people, because Norfolk has the oldest population in our prison system, right? There's guys who's been there 30, 40 years, 50 years, right? So once that gets in there, that's it. So as far as recreation goes on a Norfolk basis, the doors don't particularly lock. So there's like little hallways, and every room is like right across from each other. And I mean, it's small. It's like, I can't even, I'm trying to look at y'all's background to try to size up how small it really is. And you have men in there, right, living on top of each other in a hallway. And then they'll let them come out so many at a time to use the phone. And it's crazy. Now they're letting them out like outside of the unit, like 1 block at a time, a few people at a time. But prior to that, it was crazy. Like I was getting phone calls whenever I had a chance, or so many emails about what was happening in there, you know. So I can't speak as in depth as people getting sick, because I don't know any person per se from in prison that actually did get sick. But if you want to talk about the mental state that a person goes through in solitary, I can do that as well as Jarrell can do that.
Thank you so much, Keon. Amazing. Welcome home.
Thank you.
Home. Michael, can you speak to that same, that craziness, that this is the response for everything that happens inside of DOC, to quarantine, to medical isolate, the treatment of solitary confinement? What are your feelings around that, please?
Yeah, so I'd echo what a lot of people have already said, that this is the DOC's like standard go-to procedure. It's almost like they only have one tool in their tool chest and they use it for every situation. Oh, you were raped? Oh, cool, we'll put you in the hole. Oh, you're having a medical situation? Okay, we'll put you in the hole. You don't feel safe? Okay, we'll put you in the hole. It's just their go-to tool for every situation that comes up for them. And since COVID hit, it's been more than just that. You know, they cut off everybody's visits, so no more visits. They cut off all the programming in the institution. They've either relegated people to their cells in solitary confinement-like conditions, or they're stuck on their block. And so they're saying like, oh, this is for your own good, but they've also not implemented any wellness programs for people if they do need to be isolated in their cell. They haven't shared any like regard for people's mental health while they're stuck in their cell all day. They just recently started letting people outside the building. like, you would think they'd have thought this through a little bit, you know? They have one of the largest budgets in the state budget, and they don't have like the skill set to work these things out. So while, you know, I do feel a little partial that like maybe some isolation is okay from a public health point of view, but when you implement it in a way that feels punitive to people, of course that's what it's going to register as. So even if they did have to separate someone because they were positive, they didn't have to keep everyone in their cells all day, you know? And so it just kind of shows like they just have a penchant for punishment, and they love exercising that muscle whenever they can for people. And
it's easier for them. They don't have to work as hard if we're locked in.
That's absolutely true.
We
and,
also,
you know, I was thinking about that too, though, that like, I wonder if this in large part came from the guards' request.
Well, I think this is why it's been extended so long, is because their job is so much easier now. And so for me, it just seems like, you know, guidelines are loosening up in the world, you know, and you've had people locked in since March. It's almost June. Why are they still there, and why can't you extend it to 3 hours a day? And you know, to break it down, like, why are you still in FCI Hazleton in West Virginia? There was no COVID cases, right? And they locked the women down, not getting out a half hour every day. They get out every 3 days. They get out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 30 minutes. That's it. And they're still doing it. And there was no reason. Like, they didn't even have COVID in there.
And they're not even going to want to go back to normal probably when this is all over.
right, they love it. So this is insane, because even if you have medical isolation, the WHO and the CDC defines medical isolation in the correctional context. Even after people are confirmed and they're ideally placed in this restrictive environment, when the isolation ends, the individual is supposed to be reestablished back, you know, after their testing and everything. They're supposed to be released from isolation. So if you've got the whole place locked down, no one's going to breathe. You've got mental deterioration going on. You've got suicide increases. You've got people getting worse.
In Framingham, I get calls from women saying they moved 3 times in 1 week. And what they're doing when they move them, it's like somebody, their roommate or somebody tested positive. So now you got to move. And then they're not letting them take their commissary. They're just saying, whatever you got on, you're out. So you lose everything. And everybody knows who has ever done time, commissary is essential in prison because the food is labeled. Some of the labels that I've seen say not for human consumption, or it says expired in 2017, and we're in 2020. You know, E. coli happens all the time. So people don't have money like that, and everything in prison costs 6 times as much. So what your commissary is, you can't. Your family's struggling to take care of you, and then you lose it all because you get moved, and then somebody's in that cell, and then your stuff disappears. So
They've just compounded the torture and the punishment on top of everything else, along with COVID crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to talk about, besides decarceration, which they've pushed back so far on, there's a solution. We talk about changing the culture of correctional facilities. We still stand against solitary, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
But what could be a solution? They need to decarcerate ASAP. In the meantime, do we have any ideas around solutions, or what are your thoughts? Let's just talk. You know, it's so heavy. Who would like to go?
I'll begin. And Cassandra, thank you for letting me be here.
My pleasure for having you.
Sorry, I just jumped right in, but for those who don't know me, my name is Leslie Credle, and I work for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And I work with Jarrell closely at Families, Justice is Healing. And our mission is to end the incarceration of women and girls. And Keon, I'd like to say welcome home and congratulations for getting out. You should have been out 17 years ago. But anyway, first of all, decarceration is not going to happen overnight. So I say there needs to be a People's Oversight Committee for the DOC, the BOP, and that oversight committee should be family members of incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated people, and public defenders. Okay, I say that needs to be implemented right away, because the Department of Correction is the least accountable agency. There's no oversight and there's no accountability. Okay, they get away with murder, literally murder. Okay, if somebody gets COVID in there, there's no ventilators. One, they are not going to take you out to the hospital until the last second. And then when that happens, there's a process, right? Okay, first they have to get permission from the warden. So that takes time. They have to go through captains, this lieutenants, blah, 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 till the warden. Then hours later, the warden comes back with the approval. Then what happens, they have to call officers in, because the officers that are there can't leave their posts. So they have to call officers in for overtime. So they have to drive in from their homes, get to the prison, okay, to take you out on a medical visit, because you can't get in an ambulance by yourself. You have to have 2 armed guards with guns next to you the whole time, okay? So they have to come in, and then now you're sick and you're dying. You have to be strip searched, okay? Before you go out, you have to be shackled and cuffed, and mind you, you're critically ill, okay? Then after that, they have to call the hospital ahead and let them know we're bringing somebody in from a prison. So by the time all that happens, it's 6-7 hours later, and you're already critical. And then you know what happens? The person dies, right? And then the ambulance comes, and then they'll tell your family, oh, they died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. They will never admit that you died in that prison, because they took 7 hours to take you the fuck out of there. Sorry, excuse my French. But you die alone, okay? You die alone, surrounded by people who have traumatized you and treat you like shit, and without your family. You know what I mean? And for something that you're in there for shoplifting, you know, or drunk driving, you know. So this is real, you know. This is real right now. I just have to say this. I spent 10 months in solitary confinement, right? The first week I spent in solitary confinement, I was on drug watch because they thought I had drugs. And they put you in a dry cell. And I don't know if anybody knows what a dry cell is, but a dry cell is, there's no running water, the toilet don't flush. You're in a plexiglass room. There's a guard sitting outside your door 24/7. Every shift they change. They strip you naked. They put you in a Johnny. They put the air conditioning on super high and you have no clothes on. You're handcuffed and shackled the whole time. They never come off. When your food comes in, they take one cuff off and you eat your food. And as soon as you're done, they put it back on. When you go to the bathroom, they put a potty like a kid, when they, training them, they put a potty in the toilet. You have to shit in a potty and hand your waste to the officer so they can go through your waste to see if anything's coming out of you, any drugs is coming out of your system. Then you have to be taken out of the cell, strip searched, bend over, cough, spread them, put your ears out, go through your ears, shake your hair out, and while this female officer is shining a flashlight up your privates, okay, and then telling you to cough. Every time you use the bathroom, 3, 4, 5 times a day, you have to go through this. All right, then you're put back in your cell. There's no blanket, no pillow. You sleep with the air conditioner on you all night, freezing with cuffs on you. Now, this is dangerous, right? Because they have a psychiatrist come in every day and ask you mental questions. Are you okay? What today is? What's the date? Who's the president? To see if you're going crazy, right? And then they have a doctor come in every day and check your cuffs to see if they're causing physical harm. Okay, so after 7 days of this, they weren't gonna let me out. The doctor felt so bad because my ankles were raw from blood from the cuffs, sleeping with them on for 7 days, and forced them to take me off. So these are the conditions inside a prison that people just don't know what happens. When you're behind that wall, you're game for the officers. Like your life, you're fighting for your life, your sanity. They can do anything to you, and they will shut off contact. They will take your phone away. They'll go through your mail, so you can't write anybody and tell them what they're doing. This is what they do, and the world needs to know.
I'd love to piggyback off that too.
Yeah.
So many times when there's an incident of suicidality in prison, it often happens in solitary confinement, right? Because conditions are so bad, people don't even know if they're alive anymore. They just want to see if they can feel something, or they just want to get out, right? Just as a last-ditch effort. Maybe if I do this, they'll let me out. And now since COVID hit, with all of this extended isolation that everybody's in a pandemic, people not really having a good stream of information. What I've heard is that there are so many increases in suicidality happening right now, in depression.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just worried like, will the COVID kill me, but also will these conditions of confinement kill me? Isolating people during a pandemic is not the best response. And I'm actually wondering, I know we have Jessie on the line. I was wondering if she has any information on the volume of reports of suicide that are going on right now.
That's a good question, Michael. I hope that everybody's watching this, and Jesse, I'm going to let you answer that. But I think the popular perception of prison life for the American public is not accustomed to thinking about our jails and prisons as sites of mass torture and human rights abuses. But it's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse, could you come in and give us some insight from Prison Legal Services standpoint? She's an attorney who's done so much work, and it's an honor working with her as we are in service for our people.
Thanks, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and hear this conversation. There have definitely been huge upticks in expressions of suicidality. My understanding is that we have at least 3 confirmed completed suicides since the beginning of March, if not, I think more like mid-March actually. In DOC, I don't think that we're getting the full picture from what's happening in the counties at all. And I think, you know, from a personal perspective, the clients that I'm speaking to, you know, are just increasingly very, very stressed and not receiving any kind of mental health care whatsoever. So access to clinicians has been reduced. To the extent people do have access to clinicians, they're having to see them at cell front in non-confidential settings. And that makes it, you know, nearly impossible to, you know, to the extent it's ever really possible to get any kind of decent mental health care in prison. It's even less possible now. And I think that we're going to continue to see rises. I think that we're definitely seeing that the response from DOC is causing, you know, even more harm than the COVID itself has caused. So when their response is just as harmful and causing just as much, you know, death, then I think it becomes more and more clear that the only actual real avenue to mitigate this disaster at this point is to let people out. And the fact that our government hasn't yet seen fit to do that, I think, is extremely disturbing. And we should all really be pushing back as hard as we can. I know all the folks on this call are doing that all the time. So that's great. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Jesse. We're going to have another word from Keon, as he's not going to be able to stay with us much longer, but it's an honor to have him here. Keon, add something to this conversation, please.
Well, you said part of the solution. The oversight board is definitely important. You know, what we do know is that back when Commissioner Boone was in office, there was an oversight board, and you know the union at the time picketed, said that they wanted their prisoners and things like that. Over time, the oversight board was done away with, and since then there's been no checks and balances. But the reason why there's really no checks and balances isn't even just the oversight board. It's the fact that if you pay attention to what happened after Commissioner Boone, you had COs that went from being normal COs to sergeants, to lieutenants, to captains, right? To directors of security, to deputies, to superintendents, right? Then to deputy commissioners, then to commissioners. Now, right now, public safety sits on top of, you know, the prison. But now you have somebody that was a commissioner for the prisons that got moved up to public safety. So it's like going to tell a family with 11 brothers, the little.
You're muted.
We're losing you, Keon.
Can you unmute, Keon? Go ahead.
Hold on.
We got you.
Oh, you're really not going to get no type of help. The only way from me, from being a person that's been fighting administration during my incarceration, I've been thrown out of prisons. I've been sent up to the max for no reason, got DDU tickets for just because they didn't like what I was saying and they put a faulty ticket. So what ends up happening is the only way you can make them actually do their job is being able to kind of get it out in a public forum where it's kind of like when they're talking to each other, it's like, well, I don't have nothing else I can do. My hands are tied because if I don't do something, then I seem incompetent, right? So that's something that really has to be focused on. When you're dealing with mental health clinicians and you're dealing with nurses at the prison, you're dealing with even women who and men who start dating each other and then they don't want to listen to you either. Then you have the state board that comes to inspect the prison. Most of the people that sit on that board that's coming to inspect the prison are ex-prison guards that's part of the union. So what ends up happening is you have a whole big family and nothing gets done, right? To the point that when I went to the max, and you know, Jarrell can speak more to this because he spent a lot more time in the max than I did, and Shirley Max anyway. I was in Walpole. They would come in if they had an issue with an inmate and come put a blocker on everybody's window so nobody can see what it is that they're doing.
Mhm.
Right? Because if we can see, then we can write and let people know who's trying to help us, what's happening to us. So things like that should be categorically banned and illegal anyway. So if the spotlight is put on the whole step up process and that can stop, then that can at least, you know, give us more time to set an oversight committee over, you know, because they got it on every level, left to right. And that's the main problem.
Thank you so much, Keon. Much love. And you're absolutely right. They need oversight like never before. And it's gonna have to happen soon because we just can't continue this way. Thank you for joining us, Keon.
All right. Everyone have a good day, and I wish y'all the best.
Nice
Janelle,
meeting you.
Welcome home.
Good seeing you, man.
if I get a chance, man,
Yeah,
we'll see each other. Peace, brother.
you will. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So we also know that people, do you want to say something, Jarrell?
Yeah, just to add on to what Brother Keon was saying, and then because you know, just like the oversight committee meetings we go to, you know, we have someone from the union who is part of that committee, right? We have all the DOC officials who's part of that committee. So like what he was saying is, you know, if there's no one formerly incarcerated on there speaking to what people's needs are, I mean, it's just like talking to a brick wall, you know. And then they do that in the MASC, they do that in other counties. 10 block, Keon said, mentioned 10 block. I know 10 block is shut down right now, but when something went down, they used to close the door over your bars, right? They had bars, they had this heavy door, you know, which you couldn't see out of. So if they was doing something, they would close everybody's heavy door. You couldn't see nothing, right? You just hear, you know, the commotion and, you know, and screams and stuff. So like the DOC is very good at cutting off communication and hiding what they're doing to the outside public. So if people are watching this and they, you know, don't have no prison experiences or something, and they just think that, you know, prisons are, you know, ran smoothly or whatever the case may be, it's not, right? These are real stories, and this is what's really happening. I don't want to say they have a track record, right, of just causing more harm whenever some situation comes along. Not even speaking of just COVID, right? With anything. So they're gonna start abusing. They're gonna try to cover it up, right, and putting people in more traumatic situations. And then this is why we keep doing this. This is a evil hamster wheel that we always go through with this solitary confinement, you know, in prison in general. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
One more thing.
Yes, Leslie, go ahead.
The community needs to take back our community and defund the DOC. Bring some of them funds into community so that we can create community investment. We have to save ourselves,
Yes.
our Black and Brown community, and provide the resources. You go to Newton, okay, their kids, you know, they got everything they need. They got, you know, resource centers, they got gyms, they got this, they got that. Our kids, what they get is a cage and a quarry, you know. From the time they're 13, they're targeted. You know, gang watch, police is jumping out on them because they're walking down the street in a group of 6, you know, being kids, teenagers. So they get this mentality as teens that we're bad because the police is telling them they're bad. So we have to break that cycle and give our kids a chance, like the kids in Newton get, the kids in, you know. But our mayor wants to give the money to the courts, the correction and the police, and our governor. So unless we fight for that money and fund our community and give our kids a chance, because they end up in juvie and then they end up not be able to get jobs because they have a quarry. You know what I mean? So they're already doomed to fail before they're 18. So they have no choice but to choose a life of streets. So this is where we need to break that cycle. And the system today, it hasn't worked and it's not going to work. It's just been every year the same thing, more police, more cameras, more this, more gang unit, more drug cops. You know what I mean? How about, a community center? How about a substance abuse center? How about a mental health center? How about giving our kids a chance, some job skills, and then only then will we be able to decarcerate, because then we will have the tools and our children will have the tools to make the right choice instead of being set up to fail.
Right on, Leslie. I have to say, it's been an honor to work with Families for Justice is Healing, the National Council, Black and Pink, PLS, everybody that's doing this work. We will save us. It's all about those opportunities that are offered. We're empowering people. We're dealing with the trauma. We're finding another way to embrace community involvement, to create something better, to create something new. Was it Adrienne said, how can we be life moving towards life? There is nothing like that to do with the prisons. And when Angela Davis said it, prisons only do not remove the crimes and the harms of society. It only makes people go away. Mm-hmm. We have to stop relying on prisons to have the answers for our communities. At this point, would anybody else like to add anything before we are out? This has been a wonderful conversation. There's so much more we could say, but we have so much work to do.
Yeah, I just want to lift up some of the stuff that some of Black and Pink's members are going through at Shirley. They were already going through hell on earth there. It's known, MCI Shirley's a medium security prison. It's known as the armpit of the system. It has a violent culture. And for some reason, the DOC thought it'd be a really good idea to concentrate a bunch of queer people in that jail. And so the reports that I'm hearing from our members are that they're constantly being forced to fight in their cells. They're being checked out of their cells by their cellmates, that all their pleas for help go unanswered, and they want out of that institution. And I'm so worried about them now that they're locked in their cells 23 hours a day. I'm worried that now they're locked in with homophobic people or transphobic people. And so just bringing it back again to the suicidality, the depression that all folks experience inside, but especially queer and trans prisoners. And so I'm super worried about them. And I just wanted to lift up their plight that they're going through right now. They're trying to hold it down the best they can. They're using all their skills to survive the system. But, they need more help, and the DOC is not giving it to them.
Michael, thank you for lifting that up. We are in solidarity with our LGBTQI brothers and sisters. It's heartbreaking, the level of cruelty that goes on in these prisons and jails. And we just pray that there's going to be a moral shift of values or some change. As Jarrell mentioned, we sit on the Restrictive Housing Oversight Committee. We're trying to build relationships to show that we are human too, that our people, our loved ones, we're not afraid of them. They're human beings. There's somebody's mother, sister, brother, father, that they deserve to just be able to do what they came to do if it's their time, but not to be tortured and beaten and punished like that. Mm-hmm. We want our people to come home whole.
Yeah.
Anybody else that would like to add anything before we sign out? Go ahead, Jarrell. Love you.
I just want to make the public aware that, because there's a lot of talk in the newspapers and media about individuals coming home being released because of COVID releases, and there's like a link between, you know, the rise of, you know, violent crimes that's going on in Boston or in the city. And I want to just let the people know that's absolutely false. All right. They barely haven't released anybody from that SJC COVID release. All right. People that are coming home are wrapping up, all right, their bids, and they're coming out. And like Leslie was saying, and we're talking about solitary confinement, right? I want the public to understand that, you know, if this continues, right, if you look at this problem as not important, right, these brothers and these women and men are coming home, right, from what we're talking about, right, solitary confinement, being abused in solitary confinement, you know, being around people with COVID-19 symptoms, right, and then they're coming home, right, to no resources, right, no help, right, and that right there is going to be a problem, right? So this is what the resources and money need to come through so we can reimagine our communities, because what they're saying, you know, in the public or the media is absolutely false, absolutely false. And I just wanted to, you know, make that aware that the only answer is to decarcerate, right? They're putting people in the hole in solitary confinement right now, like the brother Keon was saying, over false tickets just to keep them, you know, in a certain cell. And they can't just keep putting everybody in the hole, every prison and every jail, right? It's not, what are you gonna do about that? So we gotta start decarcerating and start releasing, so the population in there, you know, can go down, and we can, you know, put this COVID-19 on the curve.
That's right. That's right. Because there's no curve happening in prison.
Right. My last remark, just to piggyback off of Jarrell, what he's trying to say is other states have a 5% release rate. Massachusetts and Ohio release rate was so low that it couldn't even be put on the percent scale. So it wasn't even 1%. It was not even a 0.5%. It was lower than that they couldn't even put it on the chart. But I just want to say this: solitary confinement was a problem before COVID, right? It was deemed cruel and inhumane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now that is, for them, that's the first tool that they went to say to the world, we're keeping our prisoners safe because we're keeping them locked in. And that was their excuse not to release them, is because they can use solitary confinement as a means for not release, right? I have friends still in there. I was released a year ago, you know. So I just want to say, to shout out to Lisette, shout out to Angie, shout out to Kimya, that we're out here fighting for you, and we feel your pain, and that we're not going to stop until we get you guys home or some relief from living the hell that you're living daily right now.
Thank you so much. I love you all dearly. I love you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Hope this message resonates, okay?
Mhm.
Let's keep fighting together. When we fight, we win.
We fight, we win.
I love y'all.
I love y'all.
Family.
Thanks, y'all.
Free them all.
Free them all.